It is difficult. The Gaza Peace Deal, is it a strategic pause or is this an actual deal breakthrough? What's going on? Breakthrough or strategic pause? We need to understand what happened there. And this is important because, and I will explain to you what is going on, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to figure out is what are going to be the implication in the future as to what is really going on with this particular situation. So let's first of all understand what happened, because this may just be a strategic pause. Okay. Let's dig into the real story behind the so-called Gaza Peace Deal of 2025. It's been presented a historic breakthrough, but it's really is it really a peace deal? Right? Is it really a peace deal, or is it just a strategic pause designed to buy time and reshape global optics? Donald Trump's 20-point Gaza Peace Plan promised a ceasefire, hostages freed, and aid restored, and a path toward rebuilding Gaza. That was the idea. But beneath the headlines, the reality looks very different. As you've seen, as you probably could hear it from the news recently. So let's examine how the administration pressured Netanyahu into accepting a short ceasefire that Israel could walk back at any time. Anytime they could work this back. How Hamas, weakened and under pressure, agreed to release hostages while keeping its military infrastructure largely intact. And how countries like Egypt, Qatar, Turkey are positioning themselves, not just as mediators, but as power broker in the next phase of regional politics. So again, what you're seeing is, and this is what usually happens. What usually happens in that type of situation, everyone is positioning themselves to best fit their interests. And if you understand that, then you could make sense as to what's going to happen next. Don't listen to everything that you hear. I'm going to make several points in this video. I'm going to make several points, and I'm going to share with you exactly what I think is going to happen next. And not so much because I have private information or information no one else has, but because I analyze the facts, look at the players, and figure out, what are they really doing, and what's going to be the next step. Across the world, we've got a coordinated effort, not for peace, but for positioning. The U.S. gains diplomatic leverage, obviously. Israel resets its military. Qatar and Egypt rebuild their influence. And the EU, well, it pledges billions in reconstruction funding, while knowing the risk of collapse remains sky high. I say, we'll be there, but let's make sure there's a country to go to at the end of the day, right? That's what they're looking for. So we'll talk about what the analysts are now calling the strategic pause doctrine, where ceasefires become temporary tools of control rather than steps towards peace. And if this deal collapses, as many fear, the implications could be catastrophic. Renewed fighting, altered reconstructions, stalled aid, and even deeper humanitarian crisis. So let's look at all the angles, political, military, economic, and the moral dimensions of a fragile deal, and ask the question the mainstream headlines want. Was this ever really about peace or just power? So let's start at the beginning. Let's try to understand what this 20-piece deal looks like. What are the key items of this plan? Well, first of all, And some of them, I mean, let's not knock it completely. Some of them have been accomplished. For example, the key items, the first one was hostage and prisoner exchange. Hamas agreed to release all living Israeli hostages held since October 7, 2023, in exchange for Israel releasing large numbers of Palestinian prisoners. Hamas also agreed to hand over the remain of these Israeli hostages. That looks like it's pretty much done. In parallel, Israel would release previously detained Palestinian and the bodies of deceased Palestinian prisoners. That's also seems to have been done. So we're doing great so far. Number 2, ceasefire Israel troop withdrawal calm period. A phased truce. Israel would agree to do a withdrawal or reduction of its forces in the Gaza Strip, and a sustainable calm would take effect. The plan envisages no military fights over Gaza for certain hours, allowing aid and movement of displaced persons. Has this actually happened? Do we have that? From what I hear, it would appear that this not as quite as I thought it is. 3. Demilitarization of Gaza, armed surrender. Ouch. The plan requires Hamas to demilitarize, e.g. give up or have destroyed its rockets, tunnel, weapons infrastructure. And multinational stabilization force, including Arab partners, would oversee security and supervise the weapon-free zones. I mean, look at the news. I mean, we're not here talking about the news, but listen to the news, and this is not really happening right now. Number 4, governance and transition authority in Gaza. Establishment of a technocratic transitional governing body for the Gaza Strip under international oversight, possibly headed by international figures. The existing Hamas political military leadership would be sidelines, according to the plan, from governing roles. I mean, that's not happening either right now. Number 6, reconstruction, humanitarian aid, and economic revival, large-scale reconstruction of Gaza, including infrastructure rebuilding, aid delivery, and return of displaced persons, creation of special economic zones, investment incentives, and normalization of life for civilians. Well, we're not there. Number 6, long-term political arrangement. While the plan does not immediately grant a Palestinian state, it keeps open future Palestinian self-determination under certain terms. So that's kind of the main, there were 20 points, and these were the 6 most salient one that we have. So what remains unclear or controversial is Hamas has agreed to some elements of the plan, but there remain significant disagreements, disarmament, sovereignty, withdrawal specifics. The timeline and enforcement mechanism, right, are not fully agreed or implemented. The question around whether Israel is fully withdrawn or whether the blockade on Gaza will be lifted in full are contested. And whether Hamas will relinquish any governing role in Gaza is highly disputed. Well, I thought we had this big gathering, everybody got together and had a big kumbaya moment, and everybody, the prisoners came out, and on both sides, and they got back with their family, which was great. But what really happened here? What happened? What really happened? And what's going to happen next? I mean, don't forget there were 20 points, right? And number 20 is Palestinian self-determination on terms. Number 19, commitment to a permanent cessation of hostilities by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. I mean, there were like 20 points on this thing. So what has been achieved? Well, so far, the phase 1 of the deal has been agreed by Hamas and the Gaza Strip and Israel, including a ceasefire. So that's done. All the living hostages held by Hamas were reported released. That's done. Palestinian prisoners. In return, Israel agreed to release large numbers of Palestinians. That is done. So we know all this. What remains unresolved, obviously, is a full demilitarization of Gaza, the transition governance arrangement. That is not happening right now. And the reconstruction, definitely not. We're not a long-term political issue. So out of the 20 points, really, what you have out of the 20 points, you have perhaps 3 or 5 are largely resolved. Chiefly those around hostage and prisoner exchange. I mean, really what happened is those people went home and that's it. You know, there's nothing else at this point. So what really happened? Well, the ceasefire is part of a phased plan, notably the first phase of the 2025 Gaza, war ceasefire built around the broader main trigger of the ceasefire, the release of hostages. That's what triggered and started the plan. That's the idea. That's what we want. But is it really going to be that way? That is the question. There's also a role of a third-party mediators, U.S., Egypt, Qatar. They'll say, yeah, we'll help out. We will come and help you. But that's not happening. Now, why was this approach chosen, this approach? Well, both sides face significant pressure. Israel from mounting humanitarian and diplomatic costs, Hamas from battlefield losses and international isolation, and the ceasefire gives both a tactical pause and a political path towards broader negotiation. I mean, that's all we had, really. They say, yeah, we'll do it. We'll get along. We'll release the prisoners. But apart from that, now, of course, the U.S. administration pushed and tugged and forced, as they've done. In this case, it was great because all these people get released. You can't knock that. It's a very complex problem. So the hostage and prisoner exchange act as a credible commitment device. So we are serious. Yeah, we want this peace deal. Or do we? Hamas gives up hostages back. Israel eases military pressure and allows steps towards the normalization or rebuilding. This helps build trust. Now, you have to understand that when Israel actually tried to kill those Hamas, head of Hamas in Qatar, that was a problem. And the U.S. administration went to Netanyahu and basically told him, listen, this is it. No, you're not gonna, we are gonna take control of this because you're not gonna go do this anymore because Qatar is a safe place and it is an ally. You cannot do that. So let's put a plan together, a plan where we look good, they look good, and then we'll see. If you look good, I don't look good. This is kind of what happened here. And now we need to see what the next stage is. But the next stage is hard to combat. I mean, there's key condition and risk. Hamas fully acceptance is conditional. They never said they would agree on everything. For instance, it has accepted part of the plan, like the hostages, but resisted other elements, such as full disarmament. They want to keep their weapons. Israel retains trigger rights, meaning that if Hamas fails to meet certain commitment, Israel reserves the right to resume military action. And the humanitarian access and normalization depends on further steps being taken. If the first phase stalls, the ceasefire itself becomes fragile. So basically what they said is, we're not signing on everything. We're just basically saying that we will get along, we'll go along to get along, we will agree, right? We will agree to see what happens next. And then, okay, fine, let's get our people back. But now, frankly, I'm free now. I could do whatever I want. Israel could basically go back and start bombing, and Hamas could start again, keep their weapons and attack. And we've seen in the press, it's happening on both sides already. So, So why did they agree to this then? Well, the key motivation for Israel to agree to a ceasefire, basically, one of the primary incentives was securing the return of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. That was a big thing for Netanyahu. The ceasefire is tied onto hostage for prisoner exchange mechanism. Additionally, the humanitarian toll on Gaza created heavy international pressure on Israel to halt or reduce its active military operations. Not so sure if that made a big difference, but they wanted their people back. For example, Observatory notes that Israel's acceptance of a truce was part driven by the desire to ease the humanitarian outcry. They want to get back into, everyone else. Now, number 2, combat fatigue and operational constraints. After prolonged intense operations in Gaza, Israel faces military, logistical, and political strain. A ceasefire allows Israel to pause full-scale operations, regroup forces, reassess strategy, and avoid further casualty. Analysts note that for Israel, the agreement will only ever be a temporary cessation of hostilities. Don't forget, within Israel, a lot of people wanted to keep going. They want complete eradication of Hamas. So number 3, the diplomatic leverage and allied pressure. Israel faced pressure from its allies, especially the United States, after the situation with Qatar, and to agree to a framework that could lead to long-term stabilization. A ceasefire gives Israel a stronger bargaining position for negotiating later phases. For example, the framework adopted by the United Nations Security Council was backed by Israel as part of a diplomatic package. So this is all about, it's about the people, yeah, but it's about something else, right? Number 4, enabling phase 1 of securing partial objectives. Israel probably saw the ceasefire as a stage of one of the larger plan. Hostage come back, a pause in fighting is achieved, humanitarian aid flow, and then Israel can insist on the harder demands later. Hamas disarmament. You said you were going to disarm. You say, well, we never agreed to this. And then we start fighting again. The Brookings Institute writes that the deal allows Israel to claim it hasn't surrendered key demands while still getting the immediate benefits. Now, Israel insisted that this ceasefire is not the same as a full war-ending peace deal. Okay, I'll do it, but this is not the end. It retains a right to resume operations, which they may have already done that. Israel is reluctant to commit to full withdrawal or relinquishment of military presence in Gaza until its security demands are met for obvious reason. This is a major sticking point, meaning these people have got to go and leave us alone. The ceasefire is fragile and conditional. Failure of Hamas to deliver on key terms, which they may have happened this weekend already. So in short, Israel agreed to the ceasefire because it presented a way to achieve immediate, tangible goals. Yeah, the people are coming home. This is it. Fine, great. But while preserving the option to resume military operations. And they did that on both sides. Right? Both sides. This is happening on both sides. And that is a problem. Because they feel that, this is not going to do well. Now, what was Hamas' motivations? Why did they agree to this? Right? What did they agree to? Well, hostage leverage and return of captives. Hamas held numerous Israel hostages after the October 7th attack, and part of the deal gave it an opportunity to exchange those for Palestinian prisoners and to gain concessions. For example, they have been willing to make a deal to release the hostages in return for some kind of assurance that the war would actually end. Number 2, humanitarian reconstruction and internal pressure. Gaza had suffered massive casualties, right? Destruction of infrastructures, displacement of humanitarian crisis. I mean, you've seen what the place looks like. It's not pretty. Hamas faced political pressure from inside Gaza. Civilians were suffering and wanted relief. Okay, I got you relief. Here it is. Ceasefire offered the possibility of relief, reconstruction, aid flows, and for Hamas to show it delivered for the people of Gaza. It's like when you're playing chess, right? I mean, you are basically giving up something for future gains later on, but you're not playing checkers, right? So And it's unfortunate that the people are always the one that suffered in the middle, right? But they're basically playing, three-dimensional chess. Everybody's involved. Everybody wants to be involved. But frankly, at the end of the day, what was achieved except, a bunch of prisoner release? And from, international, regional diplomatic pressure, Hamas was under pressure from regional actors such as Qatar, Egypt, and others who did not want the humanitarian catastrophe or regional escalation to worsen. Number 4, strategic pause. From a strategic viewpoint, Hamas may have judged that continuing the conflict at full scale was increasingly expensive, risky, and unsustainable. Maybe they want to go back to the guerrilla tactics that they've been using, which it would appear that they started again. Right? I attack you a little bit. I am relevant. I keep the peace. I control the flow of aids. So we're back to where we were before. And again, where the people are not the most happiest, unfortunately for everyone involved, extracting recognition of its role or safeguarding its position. While Hamas agreed to deals, it does so conditionally. It never said everything for nothing. It has insisted on guarantees of full Israeli withdrawal, an end to the war, and a legitimate role for Palestinian Authority representation. So at the end of the day, we're back to just a bunch of, prisoners exchange. It's a strategic pause. Remember, Hamas are not unequivocally agreed to full disarmament or giving up its military capability. Hamas continues to insist that the deal must lead to an end of the war and an Israeli withdrawal. If it perceives the deal will only lead to incremental gains without substantial change, it may withhold full compliance. Some of the promises, like full reconstruction, lifting of blockade, government changes, are conditional on other phases, and this is what's happening right now. In summary, Hamas agreed to ceasefire deals because it secured immediate tangible benefits. Same thing with Israel. The thing is, if you make a deal, right, the idea of making a deal, any kind of deal, if nobody loses, then it's not a deal. You got to give up something. And in this case, it worked because they gave up some prisoners and the other one gave up some prisoners as well. But now, for the next phase to continue, they have to continue to lose something. You have to be willing to lose something to make the deal. Otherwise, there is no deal. There is no deal. So, Israel has accused Hamas of planning or carrying out attacks that would violate the truth. For example, the U.S. State Department said it had credible reports that Hamas was planning a direct and grave violation of the ceasefire via an attack on Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Well, I mean, they're reasserting their relevance, which could breach the deal. Hamas and Gaza authorities accuse Israel of striking or firing on individuals under condition of the truth. They're blaming each other. You're firing at me and I'm firing on you and vice versa. And that's not good. The facts is a ceasefire agreement took effect on October 9th to 10th October 2025. And shortly after, reports emerged of Israeli forces firing on people approaching Israeli troops in Gaza. They crossed the truth line. I mean, you're getting too close. I didn't see it. I don't know. Where is the truth line? Also, Israel kept the Rafah border crossing closed, which Gaza said violates the humanitarian terms of the deal. So it's like, it's nitpicking this thing to death because they already have what they want. They got the prisoners back. Meanwhile, U.S. and Israeli officials stated that Hamas has been slow in handing over the bodies of these Israeli hostages. It's not a lot of goodwill here. I mean, both sides have credible claims of violation. And it's not possible with the public information to say, yeah, you did it, this is right, and this is wrong. It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to actually realize what is actually happening. It's impossible. So how did the Trump administration manage to do this, right? What did they do? Well, it's a great way to learn on how to make deals. Okay. So these are the key elements. Let me give you there's about seven key elements to the Trump negotiation strategy. The first one, and you should do that, learn that from your own. Set a bold, wide-ranging master plan, 20 plans. That's what the administration launched a 20-piece plan, 20-point peace proposal, sometimes called a 20-point Gaza Peace Deal, that outlines a ceasefire, hostage prisoner exchange, demilitarization of Gaza, transition of governance, reconstruction. I mean, everything was in there. By setting out such a comprehensive plan, it framed the negotiation not just as a ceasefire, but as a path to broader regional settlement. So, big picture type of things. We're going to stop fighting forever. He gave clear deadlines for acceptance of the plans to increase pressure. If you don't stop, we're really getting involved this time, and we're destroying everything. Number two, use hostage prisoners as leverage. The plan ties a release of Israeli hostages by Hamas and Palestinian prisoners by Israel as triggers for the ceasefire and the first phase of the deal. And it's good because it's very humanitarian focused. As soon as this happens, then the peace plan starts, right? So it's easy to understand. 1 + 1 = 2. And it happened. So everyone is saying, well, that's it. We're off to the races. Let's do the peace deal, right? And these people showed up, and there was this big meeting in the Middle East, and all these people exchanged pleasantries, and the prisoners got released. People were crying. People were happy. So we're done. Number two, use hostage prisoner, right? Number three, phased implementation approach, right? Rather than asking for full settlement up front, I want everything, which they know they were not going to get. The strategy breaks the deal into phases. Initial ceasefire, stop, hostage release, security transition, then reconstruction, so the party can build trust. Trump emphasizes that later phases depend on the success of earlier ones, so momentum matters. And it's very smart if you think about it, right? Because you don't want everything in one shot, because you're never going to get it at the end, but you want what's doable. And I say, well, listen, I made a deal for everyone, right? And everybody agreed. So I did a deal for everyone, so you should be happy about this. And therefore, let's make sure that it continues. But as far as I'm concerned, as far as the U.S. administration is concerned, I did a deal. Number four, there was high leverage and stick side. Basically, Trump doesn't just rely on carrots. He also emphasizes consequences if a party refuses or fails to implement. For example, publicly warning Hamas of major repercussion if it rejects or violates the deals. This establishes that the deal is not optional, right? So basically, you have to do the deal. Number five, third-party and international oversight involvement. That is nice because the plan envisages that international tracker mechanism, the creation of a board of peace, international stabilization forces, transitional governing body. This has legitimacy, monitoring, and helps enforce commitments. This allows Trump to externalize some of the burden of passing the deal and give confidence to parties. So a bunch of people, other people get involved, and they say, yeah, sure, we get involved. Yeah, look at us. We were meeting, and we're doing, and we're willing. Let's talk until we all agree, knowing again full well that they're probably never going to get there. But in the meantime, they look good. They look good, all of them. Number six, linking humanitarian reconstruction incentives. Trump's strategy connects the war-ending deals to large-scale reconstruction. By doing so, it gives Hamas tangible upsides. For Israel, the promise of transforming Gaza into a less hostile territory is a long-term security incentive. If there's a bunch of Europeans in there and everybody's reconstructing and building, that's great. Not so sure what Hamas is going to do in all this, because if they can't control the flow of funds, the flow of money, the flow of everything, they're not going to like it, so they're going to keep fighting. Unfortunately. In fact, I understand they were fighting with Palestinian families themselves to take over. Strategic rationale behind these choices. Well, basically, we're talking about pragmatism over idealism. Right? What does that mean? Well, you recognize that a full settlement will take years. So the phased approach allow immediate relief. It's smart. Right? We don't want peace in the Middle East. We just want to exchange let's exchange some prisoners, and then we'll talk about it later on. Credible commitments. By linking hostage, the deal builds a mechanism for accountability and immediate action, which you got. Risk mitigation for Israel. Israel often fears that ceasefires allow adversaries to regroup. By incorporating demilitarization and reconstruction incentives, plus third-party oversight, Trump helps reduce Israel's perceived risk. You say, okay, fine. So you mean a bunch of other people are going to be involved in that? Yeah. Okay, I'll take it. Sure. Offering upside to Hamas in Gaza. Reconstruction and humanitarian relief give the party in Gaza something to gain if it cooperates rather than simply survive a war. Then, of course, you have the international coalition and legitimacy. Egypt and Qatar get involved, international bodies. Leveraging prime pressure. Deadlines can push reluctant parties into action. Of course, some of the key elements are vague or left to future phases, such as the demilitarization of Hamas and the full withdrawal of Israel forces. What does that really mean? This ambiguity increases risk of slippage or collapse. The reconstruction, the governance depends on funding, coordination, willingness of multiple actors. May be hard to deliver if the situation remains volatile. I mean, the only way you're going to bring trucks in there to start rebuilding Gaza is you have to stop fighting not only between Hamas and Israel, but Hamas with Palestinians themselves. If one side fails to keep its commitments, then trust breaks down. The deadline and stick approach may backfire if one party calls the bluff or calculates the cost of non-compliance is still acceptable. So, who are the countries? Who got involved? Who said, okay, fine, we'll help out? Who are the countries? Well, Egypt, one of the mediators, and a signatory of the joint declaration backing the safety of the ceasefire. Qatar as a key mediator. Turkey signed a declaration in the U.S. Egypt and Qatar as a guarantor of the deal, and obviously the United States. There were also several other Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other international actors. Some countries are in talks to provide future stabilization forces, such as Indonesia, Azerbaijan, Pakistan, though not yet formally committed. See what's happening? They say, I want into the deal. Not the deal, but I want into the conversation. So I'm relevant. People will talk about it, right? become a player. So the formal committers are the U.S., Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, and guarantor the deal. Other countries support or are preparing to take part, but haven't fully committed. And that's a problem, right? Because not everybody is fully committed to this deal. You may have seen it, you may have heard it, but we shall see. I mean, what have they actually done? Well, Qatar, for example, is playing a central role as a mediator between Hamas and Israel, as we know. Okay, fine. Turkey, what do they do? Well, Turkey has appointed a senior disaster relief official to coordinate aid into Gaza. So they have done something Turkish, and has indicated readiness to contribute to an international stabilization force, possibly both civilian and military personnel. Italy, believe it or not, is involved. How? Well, Italy has pledged funding for planning reconstruction in Gaza. They mentioned $5 million for reconstruction planning. You're going to need a lot more than that. And its discussion broader support for a stabilization force. I mean, this thing is going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars, not just $5 million. United States, the U.S. is a broker of the deal. Obviously, we know what the U.S. has done. The United Kingdom has pledged additional $27 million for water, sanitation, and hygiene services in Gaza following the ceasefire. Various European and Arab countries have, such countries as Canada, the U.S. appears willing to contribute up to $70 billion needed to rebuild Gaza. A lot of European countries say, yeah, we'll help out. So what is this reconstruction going to look like? And this is the more you find out about it, the more you realize, wow, this is a lot of work. Right? You need humanitarian relief, food, water, sanitation, healthcare supply, affected public, reconstruction. You need to clear the rubble, rebuild housing, utilities, road, restoring the services. I mean, we're talking 55 million tons of rubbles to be dealt with. Stabilization, monitoring, security force. Several countries are in talks to contribute troops or personnel to a proposed multinational stabilization force. Do you think that Hamas is going to allow these people in? Diplomatic and guarantor roles. Countries are pledging to act as guarantors of the deal, meaning they will monitor compliance. We haven't seen any of that. Qatar, Turkey. But many of these contributors are pledged or plans rather than fully executed. That's why it feels to me like this is more like a strategic pause. Where yeah, sure, fine, we'll be involved, but make sure that there's nobody's fighting before we get in there. The stabilization force contribution are still under negotiation, not yet finalized. The scale of reconstruction is enormous, tens of billions and many dollars are willing, or they're in talk. Yeah, I want rather than having committed full amounts. Let's talk. Let's discuss. But again, they're using the situation to improve their standing. But implementation risks. Some contributions depend on the next phase of the agreement. How the funds and contribution will be monitored. Who is Hamas collecting the money and spending the way they want it? When the trucks are coming in, who is in charge? Is Hamas going to control everything? How accountability will be enforced remains partly unresolved. So this is very difficult. But the UK, okay, $27 million from the UK. European Union, $1.6 billion cited, okay. Various Arab and European states and the U.S. Willing to help fund $70 billion. Nobody has already committed $70 billion, but Egypt will assist training. Jordan also cited, but the $70 billion figure is an estimate of total reconstruction costs. It is not yet a guarantee that that amount will be fully covered. We're talking pledges here, pledges of expression of intent rather than full signatory. Some roles, like in discussions, participation, troop numbers, mandate, financing, all of this is still open. The governance and transition in Gaza, who will govern and how the security forces are structured, it affects how contribution can be made and monitored. Without that framework, donor confidence may be lowered. So there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of detail. Right? So what happens if, what do you care? Right? What happens if this thing doesn't work? Well, first, security and military impacts. Fighting could resume quickly. Renewed airstrikes, ground raids, rocket attacks, reversing the temporary calm. The ceasefire was intended to stop all military operations, including bombardment. Troop redeployment or withdrawal already underway may be undone, meaning Israel forces might to re-enter again Gaza more deeply. The breakdown would undermine efforts to demilitarize Hamas. Now they're going to say, well, I really want my weapon now. Right? I want my weapons back, too. And unfortunately, that's true. Humanitarian and civilian impacts. Humanitarian aid and reconstruction efforts already planned will likely stall or reverse. Delays in rebuilding infrastructures, restoring utilities, shelter, and health services. Displaced population would suffer more. Return of refugees or internally displaced persons might be halted, and those who return could be displaced again. Civilian casualty all over again. Number 3, political and governance impact. The transitional governance plans for Gaza would face collapse or severe delay. Trust between Israel, Hamas, and guarantor nation would erode, make future deals much harder. Internal politics in Israel, the far right may push to end any concession or commit to a harder military line. In Gaza, rival factions or clans could become more active or violent. You have to understand that on both sides of Israel and Hamas, they're fighting within each other as to what's good for them and not good for them. And that could impact the situation. Regional and international impact. The regional diplomatic momentum, okay, for normalization would suffer a major setback. The deal was portrayed as a milestone. So if you can't get that done, what can you get done? Reconstruction pledges and international funding would likely dry up. Donors may withdraw if security conditions deteriorate. Spillover risk, more instability may mean increased cross-border tension. Economic and long-term impact, without the deal, the Gaza reconstruction is impossible. For Israel, a renewed war would mean higher defense civilian costs. And for donor countries, the credibility of international mediation framework will be damaged, including what the U.S. was trying to do. So, at the end of the day, what really happened here, right? It would appear this is more of a strategic pause pushed by the administration, pressuring the prime minister of supporting, and supported by lots of countries and positioning themselves via the U.S. administration. So we look good. So what's emerging looks like less a genuine peace breakthrough and more like a U.S. administration engineer strategic pause designed to A, buy time, B, project progress, C, realign political global postures, letting countries publicly back the peace while quietly preparing for the next phase. So the U.S. administration's strategic calculus, optics over outcome. The 20-point peace plan is structured for headlines: hostage-free, troops pulling back, aid flowing, all concrete but short-term wins. If the administration allow to claim diplomatic leadership, even if the deals later collapses, I was in charge. I tried to help you out, people, but you didn't appreciate it. Pressures through dependency. The U.S. administration reportedly leveraged the U.S. aid, political cover, and regional incentives to pressure Netanyahu into accepting the first phase. I told you, after this Qatar attack, that was it. Knowing the Israeli right and military establishment oppose a full withdrawal. He knows that. Expectation management, Trump team knew that long-term demilitarization or stable governance of Gaza is unlikely in current conditions. So the deal real utility was to create a pause that resets perception, not to end the conflict. Netanyahu's position is under pressure. Domestic politics, facing public discontent, coalition, international scrutiny, has to appear cooperative without conceding core security objectives. Okay, fine. You want to stop? Fine. Let's see what happens. See what they did? See what they did? Strategic pause acceptance. By agreeing under Trump's pressure, Netanyahu can claim he's listening to allies while keeping operational flexibility. You're my friend. Fine. You want me to stop? I will stop. I'm going to give you that. I may want something back later on, but I'm giving you that right now. Leverage rebuilding. The pause allows Israel to reposition forces, review tunnel data, and rebuild intelligence capacity. The problem is then in terms of regional and global positioning, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and the Gulf states seen as a way to re-enter diplomatic relevance, each wanting a role in reconstruction. We are relevant again. Europe again. They are hedging against a collapse. China and Russia are keeping low profiles. They're keeping low profiles, waiting to see if the U.S. influence holds. Both would exploit that failure, you see, as a proof of U.S. overreach. Maybe you could go our way because the U.S. did not do so well after all in this particular deal. And this is where you have to be careful. Because at the end of the day, what we're saying is the U.S. relevance is at play here. And don't forget, the U.S. has other issues to deal with and will have to deal with in the near future. So let's stay tuned. Let's listen. Let's understand. And let's follow